We good? Everyone's in their spot? All right. Welcome to Pop Culture Psychology, where we talk about psychological theories and concepts through popular movies, television, video games, and comic books. Hello, everybody. Long time no see. And we are back. Finally. It's been a while. Just in time for the holiday season. Any other year, this would be a time for loved ones to get together. However, many of us are being cautious and keeping distance from their loved ones, and for those who are, thank you. I appreciate you. It's gonna be a rough one. We're all in this together, though. Though most of us express love and togetherness, other people perform horrible things to their loved ones. That's what we're gonna start our comeback with. Yeah. I got nothing. Some people use tactics to take power control from the ones they love with no regard to who they supposedly care about. Yes, coming back, we're going to be talking about abuse. Harley Quinn, Belle, aka Beauty, and the majority of the characters from the Game of Thrones are all examples of characters in pop culture who experience, are in, or just generally create an abusive relationship of some degree or another. Like, literally everyone from the Game of Thrones cast, I could probably pick something off that's somewhat abusive, except for a dude who dies in season 1. Everyone else sucks. I know many of you asked about Harley Quinn. I get it. I listen. I hear ya. But this time I wanted to put another character on everyone's radar. I really love her resiliency, and in my opinion, she's kind of an unsung hero. We're going to be looking at Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas and how she is abused by an obvious character, but another possible character in Halloween Town as well. Before we talk about Sally, 2 things. First, this should be a treat, so no tricks. There will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen The Nightmare Before Christmas, do it. Shit. Wrong franchise. Do it. Now I gotta do Star Wars. Shit. On a more serious note, if you're currently dealing with the effects of an abusive relationship, stop this video right now. Come back when you're in a little bit of a better place. I'm not even going to be silly or cute about this. Relationships, breakups, and all those things surrounding it in general can be very rough, and if it was an abusive one, of course it's going to be a lot rougher. Is rougher a word? I'm not sure, but you get what I'm saying. If these feelings are still raw, you don't need to pour any salt on the wound. Do what you got to do to cope and ease that pain a little bit. This video may not be the one for you, at least just yet. Come on back when this video will be more entertaining and not going to cause you a lot of distress. We'll wait for you. It'll be here. So with that said, let's try to lighten the mood a little bit, talking about abuse, because that's how I roll. Let's talk about Sally and Halloween Town, a place I wish I personally lived. I believe there's an opening for a new boogeyman. I hear his home's available. I want it. Do it. I know. We're gonna have to put like a little something Star Warsy in this now, because it's all Disney. You know, I just realized Nightmare Before Christmas is a Disney franchise, right? So that makes Sally a Disney princess. Yeah. Santa Claus is the Disney princess. You know what? But kind of so is Sally too. I mean, they're all even if the princess isn't being rescued in a Disney movie, they're all abused. I mean, I even referenced Belle earlier in this episode. So, Leia was a slave. Xenomorph? Oh, the Queen Xenomorph. I was thinking Xehanort, which is the Kingdom Hearts. Don't know. You're talking about aliens. Well, she was enslaved. She was definitely enslaved in a couple. Yeah, Aliens is Disney now. Yeah. She was enslaved. So you either got to be enslaved or horribly abused to be a princess. This is what... Yep, Predator doesn't have a princess though. But they should. Disney. Calling you out. But back on topic, what is Halloween Town and why is there a world solely dedicated to Halloween? Well, trees apparently. Trees can be doorways to the worlds that embody the holidays. From Easter to Thanksgiving. Again, Thanksgiving? That's like one nation, one day. Does that mean they have every minor holiday for every country in the little tree nook of that place? What does Boxing Day Town look like? We could learn a lot from Kwanzaa Town. I'm just saying. What other good holidays are there? Oh, St. Patrick's Day Town is gonna be chaos. I'm gonna keep. We could go off about this for a while. I'm gonna get back on track. No, I'm not. Where was I? Either way, one of the trees holds the Halloween holiday, which also holds Halloween Town. The tree that is Halloween, I'm so going down a spiral, guys. I am so sorry. The tree that holds Halloween, which then also holds Halloween Town, which also holds the inhabitants of Halloween Town, which are manifestations of Halloween. It's like my brain. There's an edit for you, Elio. The inhabitants are talking about are individuals like the who when you call who's there, the wind that's blown through your hair, and the shadow on the moon at night. These creatures who embody Halloween celebrate Halloween every year, and none celebrate it more than our man Jack, the Pumpkin King. But Jack has grown depressed over celebrating Halloween year in and year out. That is until he stumbles across the doors to the other holidays. This would be the nightmare before Boxing Day. Like, this made a much better movie that he stumbled across Christmas. I'm just saying it could have been very different movies depending on what door he stumbled across. As I was saying though, after inspecting one door, he gets pulled into the winter wonderland of Christmas Town. Enchanted and excited over the polarizing world of his own, this inspires him to mix things up a little bit and concoct a plan to give Santa Claus, a force break by taking over the next Christmas. Needless to say, everything goes fine and this is a pretty tame movie. No, it goes horribly wrong. Jack is the Pumpkin King, not Sandy Claus. Spelled Sandyclaws. Am I going off the... Let it spill off the camera? No, I'm keeping that. Fuck it. Though the residents of Halloween Town try their best, they ruin Christmas. Or they almost do, but Santa fixes everything because in the end he's Santa Claus and Santa Claus can do that. But we're not here to talk about Christmas or Halloween or even Jack for that matter. Another resident of Halloween Town, Sally, the creation of Dr. Finkelstein, is kind of the point of this episode. Sally, unfortunately, is not as happy as the rest of the individuals of Halloween Town, like I would be if I was part of Halloween Town. Sally's far from it. In fact, though, Halloween Town definitely does things differently than our world. It doesn't matter because no matter what world you're in, Sally is clearly in an abusive situation. So without further ado, we finally get here off my tangents. Let's see how this poor girl is the only one in Halloween Town who is actually living a real horror show. So what is abuse? Abuse is an umbrella term that is a tricky thing to define in specific, as a few meanings depend on what we're talking about can happen here. For this video and topic, we're not really talking about animals or substances, so in this context, we're going to say abuse is when a person intentionally hurts or injures another individual to gain some benefit over them. Again, this doesn't encompass all forms of abuse, and abuse in what we are referring to tends to be a higher severity than what the definition implies. But it's good enough for what we're talking about, and to be honest, in my opinion, and only my opinion, I think this definition that we're using is still even a little too broad. By this definition, boxing as a sport is abusive as you're literally punching someone to achieve victory over them, which is a benefit. When we're talking about abuse, we're not really talking about it in this kind of context or in this type of physical aggression. But we really need some kind of definition as at least basic groundwork so we can all be on the same page, so this is what we're going to use. So now that we've made this whole thing even murkier, let's talk about the different forms of abuse, as that's really kind of what I want to talk about for this episode. This will give us a little more clarity on what abuse can really manifest like. Not uncommon, you'll hear from me. The exact types of abuse in regards to loved ones varies depending on the subject and, once again, the context. As this video is mostly for entertainment, I'm not going to go through all the nuances and the different types. I am going to try to generalize and kind of mesh together the forms of abuse through different types of fields and studies, though we're going to mostly stick to psychology. Abuse is looked at and categorized differently depending on the field we're talking about. For instance, forensics will be different than therapy, and both of those will be different than, say, medical. So, yeah, though we are sticking to realistically psychology, other fields do have some information that is very helpful, even in the psychological field, even though we technically don't use it. So I am still going to splash it in because it's my video and I can. So I'm gonna take that. Yeah. They're good pieces. Well, okay, we separate the fields out a lot, and we should, especially for what we have to define things and the intent to define those things. But it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some overlap, and some overlap isn't good. And again, because I always kind of underline this, that this is mostly for entertainment, I get to kind of splash my opinion into it. So, yeah, I'm gonna, yeah, do it. I'm gonna do it. What I'm saying, though, is it should be obvious after a video to this channel is not something that I would cite a college paper on. It's been a while, so I'm tangenting a lot more, trying not to. Don't know why I keep circling my eyes back and forth. None of this can be used because of this, but that's okay. I know. Real talk. Yeah, it's been so long. It took practice for me to get focus, and now I have none. So, bear with me. But you know what? We're talking about abuse. Trying to laugh a little more about this stuff. You gotta laugh about the dark stuff. We say that all the time here. So with all that said, the first form of abuse we're finally going to talk about, and it actually has nothing to do with Nightmare Before Christmas. So there's that. Let's start off strong with talking about sexual abuse. I'm sorry, guys. But with all seriousness, like all forms of abuse, this can be by force, coercion, or really any means that does not involve consent. Nightmare Before Christmas is a PG film, so there's none of that here. Well, no, there's not. To be honest, Oogie Boogie, that whole situation kinda alludes to it, but we see none of it, so I can't really comment on it, nor do I want to. So, yeah, we'll give it a dishonorable mention, but again, the big thing here is it doesn't have to be like physically forced. I'm over here. The big thing I'm trying to point out is that sexual abuse does not have to be physically forced. It can be through, like I said, coercion, or just really anything that doesn't involve your consent is a form of abuse. So again, glad it's PG film, because Oogie Boogie, that whole situation bugged me. I didn't even mean to do that one on purpose. I didn't even mean to do it on purpose. Like, I didn't even try. Like, it just happened. I'm sorry. You blew it. I blew it. I'm sorry. I'm going now. Oh, man. Guys, I do dad jokes even when I don't try. Oh, man, I'm a little proud of myself for that one. So like I said, that sexual abuse doesn't really pertain to Nightmare Before Christmas, but of course it needs to be mentioned because people need to be aware of how wide-ranging that form of abuse is. What I will say is the other 4 forms of abuse do apply to Sally, so let's just go ahead and move on to the next one, which is physical and emotional abuse. I am using the term psychological and emotional abuse, but for those keeping track at home, verbal abuse can be in this category, though, again, depending on what we're talking to, it can have its own category as well. Yeah, for us, it all falls under the same umbrella term, so there you go. I'm kind of glad we're doing a serious subject, like, as the one we come back to, just because, I mean, the point of this is to inform people of very serious subjects, but trying to lighten the mood a little bit with jokes and humor. And because I'm so off track, it's so hard the seriousness keeps getting broken up, so in a way I kind of appreciate it. But again, make no mistake, this is a serious subject. Lastly, you can get your information without breaking down mentally. As I was saying, this type of abuse involves wearing down the mental well-being of a person being abused through actions and words. The most common intent is to make a person question their own self-worth or their own mental health through manipulation of some variety. Obviously, again, using actions or words. Some examples of this can be very direct, like shaming them or threatening or lying to a person to create fear, doubt, or skew their self-image in some way. This can also be very indirect, such as belittling the person publicly to other people, creating a false image of the person in a way that makes them look like they're either crazy or that there's something wrong with them, or just creating an environment where it forces that person a certain level of codependence not desired by the one being abused. Now let's take a step back and remember context is key, because in this case, we're talking about Dr. Finkelstein. Context. It's important. Bling. So Finkelstein is rarely directly insulting to Sally, and when he's angry with her, it's actually kind of justified at times. I mean, she did poison him a lot. A lot. Even with that said, the doctor is definitely using textbook psychological manipulation in an abusive way. When we see Sally trying to poison Dr. Finkelstein, when she didn't initially test the soup, he goes on this huge rant. Ranting is not the abuse part. Or I would be abusing the crap out of my editor. Don't use that. He's gonna use it. When we see Sally trying to poison Dr. Finkelstein, when she didn't initially test the soup, he goes on this huge rant where he tells her she wants him to starve. Okay, he could believe this, most likely he doesn't, but we also see him adding things like how he literally created her and gave her life and how thankless she is. And that's when we definitely start seeing obvious emotional abuse. He's saying these things with the intent to influence Sally. He uses guilt with the intent to manipulate her, and uses this guilt into hoping that she'll fall in line to what he wants, even if she doesn't want it. This is clearly a pattern behavior, and he uses the guilt and he uses his words in an attempt to control her actions. There's no gray area here. That's emotional abuse. But with emotional manipulation, it's not the only means of control, which leads us to the third form, which is financial abuse. This is taking control of a person's money or putting them in a position where they can't have the option to create their own financial stability. This can include destroying someone's credit. This could also be blocking someone out of an account that their name is even in. This could be increasing their cost of living to a level that they cannot afford themselves, or just using the abused finances for expenses to keep the finances of that person's money just low. Now, Sally obviously has only one job, and that's being Dr. Finkelstein's caretaker. I doubt he pays her at all, and due to her isolation, it's clear she doesn't have another form of income away from Dr. Finkelstein. So Sally probably has no way of earning money, which leads me to wonder, do they use money in Halloween Town? I don't see anyone buying stuff, and if everything's Halloween themed, it would kind of just ruin it. If it's like they pull out a few like Washingtons or whatever. Well, yeah, because they're not even in the United States. I'm really stuck on this. Well, what would they use for income? Acorns. Sure. Acorns. Why? So, which leads me to the next question. So, do all the holiday worlds use acorns? Does Boxing Day use acorns? Why am I on Boxing Day? That's a Canadian holiday, by the way. Let's just run with that again. Okay. Some answers we'll never know. Yeah, you know what? We can't figure it out. You guys tell us in the comments below. Thank you. And while you're at it, share this with friends so they could tell us, and have them like, and have them subscribe. Share, like, and subscribe is what I'm saying. Because we haven't done that yet, so do that. Whatever they use to pay for their homes and to get Halloween decorations, Sally has no access to it. That's my point. Sally was created, again, literally, to be put in a position where she at least thinks she has no other option but to stay with the big brain but little heart doctor. That's what I'm trying to point out. Okay, so for the next form of abuse, I'm going a little unorthodox here because Halloween Town is very unique in compared to other cultures, but a touch of cultural or identity abuse could be seen, which is the fourth form I want to mention, but follow me along why I'm saying this is kind of a unique case, but it still fits. Identity abuse is forcing someone out of their culture or to keep them from adhering to parts of their personal identity. Enforcing rules or creating an environment that stops someone from being able to adhere to, say, things like dietary or dress aspects of their culture, or just using derogatory terms that target their identity, or isolating them from their own culture. These are the most common examples, but there's plenty more. In Sally's case, we see this in less than 10 minutes of the movie. It's where Dr. Finkelstein straight up pulls Sally away from Halloween Town's Halloween celebration, and if you can't gather, that's kind of a big deal for Halloween Town. To even get a glance at the festivities, she had to poison the not-so-good doctor with deadly nightshade, which, if it's deadly and he poisons her a freakishly amount, shouldn't they? He only falls asleep. So shouldn't they call it like sleepy time nightshade? So my point is, Finkelstein uses a lot of tactics to isolate Sally from the rest of the world, and specifically the people that she can relate to. He uses even an all too common tactic by saying she's not ready to be part of it, making the choice on her behalf. It's not a choice. He's made up his mind and she has no input. Clearly this is against her will because, well, she tore her own arm off to go. Okay, it's not as dramatic as, say, you or I tearing our arm off, but you get the point. I also want to point out, after running away, every single time she goes back home. She explains that it's usually just to get her arm or some other reason like that, but for instance, in the movie, they actually say she's ran away 3 times in that month and always finds her way back to Dr. Finkelstein's mansion, house, thing, place of residence. There's always a reason, and I'm pretty sure those reasons are excuses, and I'm pretty sure those excuses were put into her head by Dr. Finkelstein. More often than not, he's building this idea that gets into Sally's head that she is either worthless, helpless, all the above. She cannot exist without him, and people don't like to really acknowledge this, but once you hear something enough times, even if you don't believe it, it does start influencing your action. So with that in mind, before we talk about the 5th, okay, I'm sorry, but this one, I'm a RPG nerd. I actually wrote, this actually works for like Dragon Ball and everything else too. Yes, you're waiting for me to explain myself, but I'm going to go roundabout to do it. I actually, in the script it says, before we talk about the 5th and final form, and I cannot now think of like, okay, all of these are horrible. Yes? Oh, it's a role-playing game, come on. Every nerd knows this, and if you're not a nerd and you're here, thanks. Appreciate you. And like anyone who's played an RPG game, especially we've done one on Final Fantasy with Kefka, and I think I even put it in the video. If you're an end boss in a video game, and if you don't have at least 3 or 4 different like stages to go through, you don't belong in an RPG. Just saying. But I'm stuck on that now. But I was saying, before we go into the 5th and final form of abuse, not video games, not going that far off topic. Kind of. I did. But not the point. Okay, so I've been kind of skirting around this for a little bit, and I'm glad we're all having a good time with this, but I want to say this directly, and I want to be a little bit more serious about this, because this is actually something I want you guys to walk away with. I want you guys to understand with all this that when we're talking about abuse, it's very intentional, it's very strategic, and it's thought out to wear someone down emotionally, mentally, and physically, or some variations of those. It's not an uncommon phrase for people outside of a situation like that to say, why don't they just leave? And that's my point. It's not that simple. Like Sally, many times abused individuals are isolated, they've become dependent on their abuser, and are mentally worn down, if not flat out threatened if they leave. Not only are they threatened, a lot of the times, usually loved ones' well-being are threatened as well and are brought into the picture. And 99% of the time, the abuser knows the abused very, very well and know how to keep them in line and know all the right manipulation tactics. Just leaving is not an option without some assistance, and even then, there are some mental hurdles that they need to get through as well. So saying why don't they just leave is, again, it's just my opinion, but it's a very callous way of looking at something that it's not that simple. And even if emotional support is needed, that's not the way to do it. So that's just my little rant on this. You know, with all these, I kind of want to always kind of give out saying let's show a little bit more empathy. That's my rant. Back onto the jokes and the dancing and the funnies. So let's talk about physical abuse. Fuck. Oh god, this one's hard. Guys, this one's really hard to make light of. I'm trying my hardest here. So with understanding all this, let's talk about physical abuse. I'm trying to make this as light as possible. This is the last one of the generalized form, so we're in the home stretch. This one obviously involves using aggressive physical force, but it's not always about overt physical force or violence is what most of us think about. This also can be things like forced restraint or locking them in a controlled place. It's about physically maneuvering them in some way as well as violence. An act of aggression, if you will. Pretty much anything that makes a person physically unsafe or reasonably feel that they are unsafe is what falls under this category. We do see restraint as Dr. Finkelstein does lock Sally away in her room in an attempt to control her. He even tells her she can come out if she promises to fall in line. That right there is enough. Finkelstein always intended for Sally to be locked away in his house. That's kind of the goal he wants. He's been maneuvering all these things to isolate her and to make her pretty much a personal tool. In fact, I think if the dude had his way, Sally wouldn't even be known amongst the rest of the individuals in Halloween Town. She'd just stay in the house and attend to him and every whim without him even considering anything about her. Luckily, we can't say Sally was just too strong-willed for that, which is a testament to Sally. Definitely. Like I was saying, it's easy to judge those abused on the outside, not knowing how all the factors are completely wearing the person down in all these different ways that we were talking about. But with all that said, abusers don't just give up. They usually apply more pressure. They use all these tactics, and it's for control and power. But there comes a situation where Finkelstein does what many abusers do in a situation he is. He realizes he can no longer control Sally, and he didn't have as much power as he wanted to over her, so he just found an easier target. He discarded her, and he found, or in this situation specifically made, someone new who he could control, giving Sally no second thought thereafter. That's what abuse looks like. Don't confuse anything about this with if we're talking about loved ones. That's a very, very loaded term because it's not about love. It's about control. It's about power. It's about an individual using whatever they can to get a response. I'm trying not to go heavy here, guys, but it is a heavy topic. I believe that this needs to be more of a discussion in the world, and I believe more awareness will help people understand how difficult a situation like this is. Again, I am trying to lighten the mood here a little bit, but sometimes we just got to be a little serious. So these are the generalized forms of abuse, but the target demographic, there's all sorts of types that fall under these different forms. How abuse looks are definitely dependent on these types as well, and they tend to be the indicators of how abuse manifests as well. Such things like child abuse or elder abuse, though any age can be a target, gender, be it male, female, or any other, not to mention substances, animals, race, social class, weight, and pretty much anything else you can think of. Though it sucks more than an anemic vampire to say, we may have countless ways of hurting each other. But with that said, I would like to point out that just because we have the potential to hurt each other, many of us don't. The majority of us don't in reality. At least the intent to harm. That's the kind of negative side of social behavior, as I mentioned in another episode, which we'll put here. It's a little lighter. Go see that. Definitely cleanse your palate with that one. But don't forget, when we talk about these nasty things in psychology, people do hurt each other. But we also got to remember all the good stuff. People help each other too. Now, when I first thought about this episode, it was because I was aiming to scrutinize Jack Skellington, as I remember him in the movie at least being very dismissive and kind of discarded Sally when she said anything or did anything. Where being dismissive is not abusive in itself, just means you're kind of a dick. It did make me want to re-examine their relationship, as I thought there could be other indicators to abuse, or at least an unhealthy power imbalance between them. But apparently watching the movie a bajillion times wasn't enough for me to remember it correctly. Due to Sally's situation, it's safe to say that most of the residents of Halloween Town, including Jack himself, barely know her, at least in the beginning, and the situation around her is very unique, like hijacking a holiday unique. It's very different than normal, and that needs to be taken into account when you're looking at all this stuff. In the beginning, Sally stayed on the outskirts of the population. She never really engaged with anyone, and she just watched from afar. Though it may not be obvious to her, or maybe to most of us, like anybody else when we're the victims of abuse, not everything is such an overtly effect. In Sally's case, she may have said she was ready to participate in the world and definitely wanted to and had that drive to, but her creator, Dr. Finkelstein's words and actions were influencing her. But watching the events slowly unfold, it showed her how obsessed Jack became with Christmas, and with help of a vision, she saw the doom in his plans. Slowly with this knowledge, we see her becoming more daring. It first went from encouraging Jack from a distance with gifts to running into a crowd of people she never even really engaged with, trying to stop him from doing something she thought was, well, just an awful idea. And spoiler, it was. Jack in general was dismissive of everybody. Call it willful ignorance. he didn't want to hear negative input. He wanted Christmas to happen so bad. He was just generally dismissive. Not necessarily in a hurtful or negative way, he just had the utmost optimism just so he could make his dreams come true. But in the end, Jack did snap out of it, debatably a little too late, depending on how you look at things. He eventually realized that though Sally wasn't on board with his dreams, she always had his best interest in mind. Sally had his back, and in turn, he did have hers. Back to Oogie Boogie. Jack was no longer preoccupied with his temporary obsession. He showed his true colors, and just like Sally showed hers, once Finkelstein's influence lessened, there was not a lot of hurt there, but a lot of love. Thank you guys so much for watching. Very, very interesting one to come back to, but I thought this one was important. If you want me to cover something more specific, a little lighter, a little darker, please not a little darker so early, but please leave a comment down below. There are other tree worlds that we have to discuss. Have to? Yeah, we have to. Science has shown us that we do have bad days, and loved ones sometimes are the target of our frustration. But do not confuse one bad Christmas day with repeated patterns or extreme behaviors. I am going to put some resources listed below, just in case someone out there needs them. I think it's important. On one more last note, there are more Pumpkin Kings than insane doctors in the world. You deserve your Pumpkin King or Ragdoll Queen, whichever fits you best. Until then, thank you again for watching. I'll see you guys next time. So now that we've made this even murkier, let's talk about the different forms of... So now that we've made this... Start, go. Cut that. Cut that out. Edit it just like that. Not uncommon, your heel... Not uncommon... Whoa, I did it again. Words, I can use them. Not uncommon, your... Yeah. We'll go with that. Yeah. You good?
Yeah. Good.
You happy?
You good?
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm good. I'm good if you're good.
Yeah.
All right.
You good?
All right.
Cool.
You over there okay? I see that, you asshole.